Welcome to Shooting Spaces, a real estate photography podcast. Discussions on gear, technique, industry news, and interviews with the best in the business. Now, here are your hosts, Rich Baum and Brian Berkowitz.
Welcome to Shooting Spaces, a real estate photography podcast. This is Rich Baum from Sacramento, California.
And Brian Berkowitz from New York.
And welcome to our podcast. And as we always do, I just want to start off by talking to Brian, who's on the East Coast in New York, and checking in what's going on. How you doing?
The weather's changing here. I'm doing all right. Things are slowing down. Definitely much slower. Only had, I think, 3 or 4 shoots this week. But it's all good. It's getting cold out. Started wearing the sweatshirts, and the seasons are changing.
The seasons are changing quick here, too. We go right from a hot 105 degrees to a nice 40, 50 degrees. So I'm excited. Ski season coming up and getting ready for my workshop in Auburn, California, my last workshop of the year and possibly my last workshop for some time because I've got too many things coming up in the near future. So,
well, that means if you want to attend, make sure you do you have any spots left or you're sold out?
I got 1 spot left.
All right, get on it then.
Yeah, but
fill in that last spot because according to Rich, who knows when the next one will be?
Yeah, and we've got a great group of people and all like-minded people looking to learn. So really excited about that. But let's talk about something at hand. And what are we doing today, Brian? We're doing a Ask the Guys.
We haven't asked the guys. We have a question from David out of Denver, and I will play it for you now.
Hey guys, my name is David Besnet and I work in the Denver area, and I wanted to know if you might discuss insurance on one of your upcoming shows. What kind of small business insurance should you get if you're a real estate photographer? What the expected cost might be, and any companies that might provide such insurance to photographers. I want to make sure that my equipment is covered and any accidents that may happen when shooting a property. Thanks so much. You guys have a great show. Appreciate it.
All right, David, thank you for that question. That is a great question. And for anybody that listened last week, I told a nice story at the end of the podcast where my insurance came in handy. So we'll get to that later. But Rich, I know we're in different areas. So obviously insurance is definitely different in different locations. But obviously you have insurance. So what? Tell me about what you have as far as liability, as far as your equipment coverage. Do your clients request a certain amount of coverage, etc.? Where do you stand?
Yeah, no, it's a great subject. And, something that always I'm so amazed, I guess the word is amazed at, is how many people out there and our listeners, I can only imagine how many people are out there that really don't have insurance or aren't insured up to where they should be. But the biggest thing, and this is something I think that we all can stand to think about, is are we all 100% sure on what our insurance covers? Because I have found that the majority of photographers that do have insurance, they know they have insurance, but when something happens, and for me, it doesn't happen that often, or at least something breaks that I would claim because I have a deductible, but most people are not aware until I see in the post, I've got insurance, so I'm just going to find out if it's covered. Well, that's something that actually happened to me recently in the last year. And I found out that something wasn't covered. And I was shocked because I'm always the guy that is telling people, just make sure you're insured, make sure your insurance is good, and you're covered. So I think the most important thing besides getting insurance is to really understand what is covered. So when you need to do a claim, God forbid you need to do a claim, you have no question that it's covered. Now,
are you referring to liability or?
No. Well, I would say yes, covering everything, but I personally have never had to use my liability insurance, which is great. I've been very lucky not to break anything I've got a story, but I won't probably go into it today. But I've got a story. When I just started out, I broke something that seemed very insignificant, but was very meaningful to a homeowner. But it all worked out really well. I'm lucky. My wife is a business person, and she really got me involved in making sure I had the right amount of insurance. I think mainly because she wanted to make sure I didn't get sued, so she would lose everything we have. But I have liability insurance for my business, which I have. It's a $2 million coverage. And for most people out there, I would probably say that most people that have liability insurance have $1 million in coverage. But something I found out through my through asking was it was almost no extra money to up it from 1 million to 2 million. I have State Farm insurance for my liability, business liability, and my property. And I just find that it works really well for me, although this year I did have an issue where I was not covered by State Farm for a specific water damage. And I found that out after the fact, so I had to eat it. And that's okay, though. It was not that big of a deal, and I learned my lesson. But now I'm totally covered for everything I need. And I found that State Farm, I only did one claim years ago, but I dropped a camera, and it broke the lens in half, and it also broke the body. And they just replaced it, no questions asked. I had a check within 3 days, and I was really pleased with that. But I now have better coverage. So if I broke something, and if it was, in water damage, because I'm often shooting sports in the rain, and even real estate, I shot in the rain before. So I believe in getting really good full coverage. Now, for my liability, I've got $2 million. I believe I am covered pretty well for almost anything I do. And I shoot some pretty nice houses, but I think you've just got to really, and I'm no expert on insurance, but I just want to say everybody out there that is doing this at all, making money and going into people's houses, you absolutely have to have liability insurance or you're not smart. I won't use another word, but you're not smart. And you just got to cover yourself. And as far as product and insurance for your equipment, I have it set up a few ways. I have one policy. Well, it's the same policy, but it's broken down to what kit I use for real estate, and I have a separate kit and a certain amount of insured. Then I have a kit for weddings, and I have that separately insured. And then I have a kit for my sports, because every genre I shoot, I have a different kit. Now,
doing a lot of those cameras and lenses carry over to multiple genres?
Yes, but what it is doing is it's all balancing out that if I am on a real estate shoot, this basically means when I leave the house, I have a different policy than if my house got broken into. Now, I don't believe anybody should only be using homeowners insurance, because chances are you're not covered if you have a business.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I don't think your homeowners will cover your equipment.
No. So I have my policy, which part of it covers an overall amount at home, but that's a different price than if I'm out on the road and my car gets broken into or I get damaged. But I have each separate genre. I have real estate or architecture, I have sports, and I have weddings. And I have different amounts of equipment all itemized there. So if I'm out on a wedding and I get my wedding kit stolen, I don't have to have other camera gear that I'm not using for weddings in that policy to increase the amount of my policy. Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, I have something a little bit different, and I have pretty much, as you said, itemized. I have all my gear itemized, and everything is just covered under one policy, regardless if I take, one item out or I take everything out on one shoot. It's all covered under one overall policy.
Mm-hmm. And who do you have that does yours? Mine is State Farm. And
I'm insured through PPA.
Yeah.
So I used to be through the Hartford for years, and I decided to go out and price different insurances, and I found that PPA was the easiest and most affordable for me. Now, the only downside to the PPA insurance is that you have to be a PPA member, which I wasn't at the time. So I think it's $350 for the year to become a PPA member, and then insurance and then insurance is on top of that. But believe it or not, that actually still saved me about $800 a year over the Hartford that I was paying. So I think all in now, actually currently I don't even have my liability through them anymore. I actually switched companies for my liability. Now I only have my equipment, and I'll explain the reason that happened. I used to have, up until about 4 months ago, I had my liability and my equipment covered through PPA. And then PPA, being a drone pilot, I need to have drone insurance as well, as far as liability. And now PPA would only cover me up to $50,000 for my drone liability, which at the time was not the biggest deal because I thought was not the biggest deal because on any typical home that I'm shooting, my little 7 or 8 pound drone would not cause more than $50,000 worth of damage.
I disagree. You could run into a Rolls Royce and put a dent in the side.
So it's funny you speak of that because so essentially what happened was, as I mentioned a few months ago, I got a big contract with a really, really high-end local mall, and I'm doing a lot of drone work for them. And the local mall, it's pretty typical to find Bentleys and Rolls Royces in the parking lot there. And when I started with them and I sent them my policy, they were like, yeah, your $50,000 is not going to cover it because almost every car in this parking lot is worth more than $50,000. So I started pricing out, and I found a company that can insure me drone-wise for $1 million liability also. And part of that drone coverage for $1 million liability also included regular liability also.
What if you run into somebody? Is that because that could cost millions? Is that under your general liability or the drone liability?
That's a good question.
Example, I've done it. Example.
Exactly. I mean, I would imagine it's under my drone, but that's a good question.
You better find out, man.
I'm a very safe pilot. I mean, I don't fly near.
That doesn't matter, man. It does not matter.
It could drop out of the sky.
It could do its own thing, which I know very well.
So, well, the good news regarding my new policy was that when I had to apply for this new liability, with the drone, $1 million drone also, it was about $400 more than my old liability policy. Mm-hmm. So when I went to my client, this mall, and I said, look, this is costing me significantly more than I had before, they actually offered to split the cost of my liability policy with me, which was incredible. So essentially I got this new policy, which was more expensive, to cover my entire business, and I had my one client pay for half of it. So I'm literally just invoiced them half the price. But that was just, getting lucky and me just negotiating with them a little bit. So I do have $1 million liability and drone liability through a company that basically insures drones. So it's not your typical normal State Farm or PPA or the Hartford. They're a company that specializes in drones, but it does include a regular $1 million liability.
Yeah.
Now, I still do have my equipment all insured with PPA. And that's a simple, itemized list. And, you literally calculate your costs. And I think there's 2 different ways to calculate the cost, whether it's replacement value or, I forgot what the word is, where it's what it's the amount of money it went down, whatever depreciation, exactly. Mm-hmm. So appreciation, you have the option of listing your items at if you want depreciation cost or replacement value and all that, and then just have it all itemized through them, and you calculate your total. And let's say it comes out to $25,000, you say, okay, I need $25,000 coverage, and their price is a sliding scale based on the amount you want to cover. So it's pretty simple. But if you don't list your item itemized, it will not be covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Meaning, like if I just got the new Canon 17 millimeter, speaking of which, I have to send them that. If something happens to it this week, it will not be covered because I haven't sent it into them yet.
Now, what's your deductible on your policies?
On my gear deductible is $300, I think, or $250. It's pretty minimal, and I know that because last winter I was lucky enough to crash my drone, and it went right into a tree and fell, and pieces and parts of it cracked. and they actually, believe it or not, covered my drone. I think it was like $1,100 or $1,200 to repair it, which sounds crazy because you can get a new drone for that. But all I had to pay was a deductible, and which was I think $250, and got it fully repaired. So yeah, it works. And I've unfortunately had to use both my liability and my gear insurance in the past. The drone I just told you about, and I also, when I was doing weddings probably about 8 years ago, I had a backup battery and a lens stolen on a job. Right out of my case. My case was right on the side of the DJ, and I got back at the end of the night, and I had, at the time, it was a Canon 7D, and a 24 millimeter prime lens just stolen right out of my case. So it was a whole ordeal. I had to call the cops and file a police report and all that because the insurance requires that. And, besides my deductible, which I think was $200 or $300 at the time, they literally sent me a check for a brand new one. I went and bought, brand new body and brand new lens. So
well, I think that's great. I guess the reason I stay with State Farm, and I've checked around with PPA and with the other one, what is it called? Usher? I forget.
Usher Hill or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
I just found I was shocked when I called Hill and Usher about the price to get the same coverage. And even with upping my policy, and I have a lot of equipment or a fairly high policy number, but I am paying under $400 a year for my equipment. I do have a $500 deductible, but man, that's like a third of what I was getting. I was looking at over $1,000 for either PPA or Hill and Usher, and I just I'm pretty satisfied. I know a lot of people are pretty satisfied with State Farm. So, and I'm no way affiliated with State Farm. I was actually kind of pissed off when they didn't cover me because I actually contested it. I was really like, listen, you guys, you gotta do this. But everything worked out, and I'm pretty satisfied now. So basically, as soon as my kit goes in my trunk on a job, one of my policies enacts. They're all under the same policy, but that part of it enacts, and I'm doing a real estate job. And if my car got broken into, I'd have everything covered. And so, and I want to say one more thing before we go. I want to make sure everybody, when you're doing your itemized list of what you have or what you don't have, really be careful. A lot of the little things can add up to a lot. I'm talking even little things like filters, like batteries, like you name it. I can't even go through what you have, but really think about
tripod heads, all that stuff.
You just think about what you want and need insured, because it can really add up. And after it happens, I just know everybody that's a photographer, and it does eventually happen to them. They're really bummed because they were not covered, or they didn't have insurance, or what they had wasn't covered in that specific camera, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I think just really have a comprehensive, full understanding of your insurance policy.
Yeah, and speak to your agent. Ask them. Is this covered? Is that covered? If I bring this here.
And how to go about claiming it. And so it's not a surprise how long you're going to be out. Do you need rental gear? That's a big one too. How are you going to shoot the rest of the week if your camera gear gets ripped off? So you got to think about all those things. Do they cover rental gear? Just like car insurance,
Yeah. And also another thing I want to note is not make sure, it's up to you, obviously, but another thing to think about is whether you should cover your computers. Laptops and all that type of stuff, because most people think, camera gear, that's it, but I have my desktop. Your laptop, if you're out using it on the road all the time, for sure, but even your desktop at home, if it's used for business, your regular homeowner might or might not cover it. I don't know for sure. You have to speak to your insurer, but if you have a $3,000 iMac 5K setup, you got to insure that. God forbid it falls off your desk or something.
Yeah.
You don't want to be out that money. So anything that you potentially use in your business, I would consider covering, or at least ask your insurance agent if it's worth covering or if they will cover it.
Yeah. One other thing to think about, and this is kind of off topic, but it's all part of it because you just mentioned it's really looked at as your office gear, your office equipment, your fax machine, your scanner, your printer, whatever you have. But
Did you
a really good
fax
thing.
Machine, Rich?
What's that?
A fax machine?
Yeah, man. I have a all-in-one printer, and my wife and I still get paper fax. So that's it still happens, man. We're old school. But I just want to say that one thing we did, and my wife made me do it, but my wife is kind of in the insurance business, health insurance, but she's very aware of business. She's the business end of this operation. Anyway, I took my iPhone, or I took a camera, and I went through my house. I just walked through my house from the first room to the last room, inside and out. And I just did one video, and it only took me 10, 15 minutes. I went through each room, and I would stop the camera for a second. I would keep it running the whole time, but I'd stop it on our TV. I'd open a drawer up. I'd open a cabinet up, and I'd just show, or I had my son, I think, opening the doors. I would just show inside that cabinet. And then when it comes time to it, you don't have to really do an itemized list for most everything. You can just show the video or stop the video at the place that got ripped off. So if your stuff gets ripped off, you can just, you don't have to have a single image for everything. You can just do a video, and it's really quick and easy and really good. Makes it fun and easy to have.
No, and that's a good idea, even for your equipment, just to help you keep inventory of everything you have.
But make sure that video is not on a computer that's going to get ripped off.
That's exactly. Don't keep it on your insured computer.
Yeah. Well, that's really, really good information there, Brian, I think. And I really want everybody that's listening to this podcast to ask yourself right now, do I really understand, and am I fully insured, and do I understand what is insured and what's entailed to recoup my money if case that God forbid something happens? Because it will happen. I promise everyone, maybe not everyone, but I promise I will have something broken or stolen in the next 2 years. So I need to know.
No, for sure. Now, I just thought of something while you were talking, and I think this is important to consider when you're choosing your insurance company also. Now, when you're going into homes, it's not as prevalent, but when you're going into, I do a lot of commercial real estate, and when you're going into commercial spaces, a lot of these companies want an insurance certificate, which is essentially just proof that you're insured. And definitely speak to your insurance agent and find out the process of getting their certificate if you need it. I've had, like I said, I used to be part of the Hartford, and it was actually a process. If I needed an insurance certificate, it would take 2 or 3 days, and I'd have to email them 2 or 3 times and remind them and let them know I need an insurance certificate. Usually I would just email the name of the company I'm working for along with the address, and they usually send you this little insurance certificate that says, I'm insured, and now this new company I'm working for is also covered under this policy.
And they faxed it to you, right?
They emailed it to you. Yes.
Well, it's funny. Yesterday,
15 years ago, they faxed it to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yesterday, I went in. I shot a really nice house. I think it was $2 million, and I mentioned to the owner, I said, I'm moving this lamp. She said, and I said, but don't worry, I'm fully insured. And she says, oh, don't worry about it. But I guarantee you, if I broke the lamp, she'd probably hit me up for, hey, you're insured. You're going to pay for this.
No, for sure. Exactly.
And as far as my commercial jobs, I rarely get asked for proof of insurance. I'm amazed, kind of. I would
really
want it.
Interesting, because I probably get about 10 to 15 certificates a year.
Yeah, well, I do. Okay, I'll say 2, but I'm not doing probably the same amount of commercial shoots as you. I'm doing primarily real estate, but no, I do get asked to, and I just think it's really important to be able to address those situations,
Sure.
know what you're going to do before you need to do it, because it sucks when you're in a rush.
I will say with PPA, and like you said with State Farm, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I do have them. Well, it's funny, I don't anymore, but I did have them up until 3 months ago. They have an actual page on their website that says, need an insurance certificate. You click on it, you fill in the info, and just hit submit, and you get it usually same day. With this new company, this drone insurance company, I just email my contact there with the stuff, and it's a small little company. I usually have it same day. Like I said, with the Hartford, it would be 2 or 3 days and have to send a couple of emails.
Yeah.
So
Good.
find out that process, because if you have a job coming up and your client the day before calls you and says, oh, by the way, we need your insurance certificate, you want to make sure that you can get it from them by the time you shoot, so your shoot doesn't get postponed or anything like
Great.
that. So.
Well, wonderful. I think that covers it. And again, everybody, just make sure you know what you got and what you got to do. So, Brian, I'm going to just take it out by saying that everybody out there, please subscribe if you're not. We got some really exciting things coming up, so keep an ear to the grind, and you'll hear the information about what's coming up. And I want everybody to know that we've got this feature, Ask the Guys, and we can always use some good questions, and it's just a 90-second recording, and add your business in there and your website, little promo, and ask away, ask some good questions, because this question today, insurance, is always something we don't like to talk about. It's not sexy or fun, but it sure is important. And because if we don't have insurance, we could be out everything. So, think about it.
Exactly. And if anyone wants to hear about my liability story, make sure you listen to last week's episode, Ask the Guys 14, when I talked about how I lost a few jobs and insurance saved my ass.
It's the ultimate nightmare.
Yes, and I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Anyhow, all right, Rich, that was a beautiful takeout, and we appreciate everyone listening. Don't forget, like Rich said, subscribe to our newsletter so you're included with all the new stuff that comes out.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And with that, we'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye, guys.
This has been Shooting Spaces, a real estate photography podcast. Subscribe to this show and don't forget to leave us a review. You can also follow Rich and Brian on social media and at their website, shootingspacespodcast.com.